If you've been in the Dutch oven market for a while, you know the heavy hitters like Le Creuset and Staub, but maybe you haven't heard of Smithey. Smithey is a cast iron cookware brand with tons of pots and pans, but the cool thing about them is they're polished cast iron. The price of each of these three Dutch ovens just depends on the size and shape that you're getting, but let's just compare the 5.5 quart size since that's the most popular. Le Creuset comes in at around $420, the Smithey is $300, and the Staub is around $400 to $420 depending on the color. The Smithey doesn't come in any colors other than the cast iron, whereas the Staub and the Le Creuset have multiple color options. The main differences between the three Dutch ovens are, first, the Staub and Le Creuset are both enameled interiors, which just means there's no seasoning ever required, it's slightly easier to clean, there'll be no chance of it rusting, and it's non-reactive, which just means it can handle acidic foods like tomatoes. The other thing about enameled interior though is it can chip or break if you're being too rough or you drop it or anything. It's also not non-stick, and it can stain, which isn't a big deal, but just something to consider. It's also slightly less durable than raw cast iron, and usually they're more expensive. Basically, enamel interiors are low maintenance and beginner friendly. The Staub has a matte black enamel, which is usually better for browning, but also harder to see the browning when you're cooking because of the dark color. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. And the second thing to consider would be their lids. The Smithey and the Staub both have self-basting lids, which just means it has these lines, which helps when the steam comes up, hits the underside of the lid, and helps sort of channel the moisture and drip down evenly, rather than running off to the side. Whereas the lid on the Le Creuset is smooth, so the moisture can kind of just run off to the sides. The third thing to consider would be their weight. The Smithey, with the lid on, weighs about 14.5 pounds, and with the lid off, it weighs about 9.2 pounds. The Staub weighs about 13 pounds with the lid on, and with the lid off, about 8 pounds. And the Le Creuset with the lid on weighs about 11.5 pounds. So the Smithey is a tiny bit heavier, but not by too much. In the end, they're all great Dutch ovens. I don't think you can go wrong with any of them. For me personally, I like the look of the Smithey cast iron Dutch oven, and it's also $100 cheaper than the other two. It is maybe slightly more maintenance because you do have to season it, and you have to be careful with acidic foods like tomato-based foods right at first before you've built up that coating. But since it's polished cast iron, it's still less maintenance than a regular cast iron Dutch oven. Some people seem to think Staub is better than Le Creuset. This person said that their favorite cooking method is braising, and that's where the Staub shines. They said Staub was far superior for the tenderness, juiciness, and flavor of the meats, and they could always tell the difference. And they say the black enameled interior of the Staub cookware provided a superior browning over the sand-colored interiors of the Le Creuset. And in another article, I read how the Smithey seemed to be better than the Staub. As a seasoned chef with extensive experience in using various cookware, they found the Smithey Dutch oven to outshine the Staub. They said that both the Smithey and the Staub Dutch ovens excel in browning, moisture retention, and contributing to the final flavor of dishes. It's the subtle but significant advantages of the Smithey that make it stand out. Its superior ability to maintain a consistent simmer is particularly noteworthy, ensuring that dishes like red wine braised short ribs stay juicy and tender. This feature, coupled with its excellent heat retention and compatibility across various heat sources, makes the Smithey Dutch oven an invaluable tool in the kitchen. Well, hopefully I was able to clarify some differences between the three Dutch ovens, or maybe I just confused you more. For me personally, I like the Smithey cast iron Dutch oven the best, but can't go wrong with either of them. All right, bye.